In order to add and subtract decimal numbers, what we do is stack the two numbers on top of each other, lined up by the decimal places. So we would write out 5.435, and then our second number, 4.96, would be written so that those two decimal places are just stacked vertically above each other. And then we'll subtract those two values. If we want, we can put in placeholder digits, so we can add a 0 here, just to see that we'd be taking 5 minus 0. But we'll start from the right-hand side and just move across. So starting with 5 minus 0, we'll get 5. 3 minus 6, we can't subtract directly, so we'll borrow from that from that next column, giving us 13 minus 6, which will be 7. We borrowed one from the 4, making that a 3. We can't take 3 minus 9, so again, we'll borrow from the next column over. 13 minus 9 will give us 4. That decimal place will drop straight down. And then our last step will be to take 4 minus 4, which will be 0. So we get 0.475 by manually lining up those decimal places and then just following standard arithmetic rules to subtract those two values. It's good to remember how to do that process if we ever need to, but we are also going to be allowed to use calculators in this course. So now in example 3, we want to take a look at doing some decimal arithmetic using a calculator. This oftentimes seems like it's going to be much easier. It usually is, but there are still some tricks that we need to look out for. For instance, in part A, we start off with negative 3.23. The trick here is that every calculator is going to work a little bit differently. We're starting off with a negative number. If I started off trying to press the subtract button, my calculator gives me an error saying invalid format used. Your calculator might work a little bit differently, but there are a couple of different ways we can deal with this. We could start off by entering 0 first and then subtracting 3.23. Now that does give us that negative 3.23 that we want. And then we could add plus 8.279 to get 5.049. Usually there's some clear button, so we can erase whatever we just completed. And I want to show you another method, which again, depending on your calculator you may have available to you, is there might be a plus minus button. If we have that, we can enter that. And now that's not a subtraction symbol, but a negative symbol. So we can enter negative 3.23. In this case, I can close those parentheses. And then we can add 8.279. And we get that same answer of 5.049. This will just take some practice with whatever calculator you're going to have with you when you come into test, so that you're familiar with how to use that. Part B is more straightforward because we start off with a positive number, 6.38, and then we'll subtract 1.575 to get 4.805. And then in part C, we're back to this trickier situation where we start with a negative number. So again, I'll demonstrate this method that works pretty well, is to start with a 0 and then subtract 3.085. And then in this case, we're subtracting that second number as well. So minus 1.09 will give us negative 4.175. So some of this is really just practicing with your calculator to see how this should work. But keep in mind, we can always start off with 0 and subtract to get that first number to be negative.